Fallout 76 first began its development story back in 2013, as it was revealed in NoClip's documentary that Todd Howard had considerations during Fallout 4's development on the potential prospect of making a multiplayer game mode. However, the ideas were concluded to be too large in scope, and Bethesda decided to prioritise on the single player campaign only. However, the idea of a multiplayer Fallout stuck, and during this period of time, the recently formed Battlecry Studios met Bethesda, which ended up leading to positive conclusions with their conversation, as Todd Howard had asked the studio if they could work on the multiplayer game that we now know as Fallout 76. And this is the troubled history of Fallout 76.
Sometimes it doesn't just work.
The multiplayer project was greenlit upon the release of Fallout 4 in November 2015. Now, during this time between the recently started production work on the DLC for Fallout 4 and the introductory stages of Starfield, Bethesda felt that a multiplayer game in the Fallout universe would help fill that time between the releases. Now, the issues began when Battlecry Studios, who are now known as Bethesda Austin for future references, had to convert somehow the Creation engine, which was an engine that has only been exclusively used for single player, to be used efficiently for multiplayer. As expected, this proved quite difficult, and the challenge seemed to be already on the new studio, as code from even 2002's Morrowind, yes, you heard me, bloody Elder Scrolls Morrowind, was still being used for the engine. The team decided that the best outcome was to implement netcode into the engine that was used in older Quake games, and they decided that the map needed to be larger.
It is 4 times the size of Fallout 4. Have 16 times the detail.
Thank you, Todd. Yes, they decided on this as they wanted to use a more rural location that wouldn't have been targeted by nuclear warfare, as that meant that the forest, for example, could encompass parts of the map. Another decision that made people realise Fallout 76 was going to unleash an enormous atomic bomb was their decision to not include human NPCs. The reason for this was that Bethesda wanted you to know that, number one, it would take longer than 25 years to form hostile factions to form and take control of certain areas, and number two, they wanted us to feel that every human character we saw and interacted with was other players and not NPCs. This decision led to them making a new type of ghoul enemy that we now know as the Scorched. However, to give credit to the team, it was discussed through Kotaku anonymously that the Austin team incredibly disliked this decision on the lack of human NPCs, but it was a mix of Todd's insistence and that Bethesda executives felt that the significant amount of time to update the engine to allow multiplayer capabilities meant that instead of taking time to add NPCs, they decided that simple computer terminals would convey the same level of narrative storytelling. Oh boy, how wrong they were. May 29th, 2018, a live stream was started that lasted just 24 hours, and it was just simply a Vault Boy bobblehead toy in front of a monitor with a please stand by test pattern screen, which everyone knew that it was immediately referencing Fallout, and the hype was starting as the stream was watched by just a small amount of people, 2 million people. Then May 30th came, Fallout 76 was announced. And when was the game's release? Its release date was actually quite soon, and it was going to release on November 14th, 2018. The reaction? It was mixed. A petition was created to ask Bethesda if they could include a single player mode, which was fair enough considering the series has predominantly been single player, and it seems like it wasn't very helpful considering that there wasn't a fully made single player mode. Well, I guess there kinda is, but I'm getting ahead of myself. While in relation to positive press, there was actually a sudden burst of interest in tourism to West Virginia, with the website West Virginia Explorer having an increase of 15 times the visitors on the site just days after the game's announcement. And then the bomb was launched. During the beta stage for Fallout 76, there was an interesting bug where if you clicked any button on the now defunct Bethesda launcher, the entire beta would have just deleted itself fully. But don't worry folks, the nuclear blast doesn't just end there. Upon the game's actual launch, the game was immediately pretty much heavily discounted by 33%, which pretty much shows you just how disastrous this game launch was actually, and I'm not surprised considering there were some pretty hilarious bugs, like being able to set off an unlimited amount of nukes before the server would inevitably crash and burn to the ground, and little issues that would have thought, would have been considered. Once the year turned to 2019, which considering when it came out was only just 2 months away, silos to set off nukes were suddenly locked, and enemies who would have dropped parts of the nuke code would now no longer spawn. Thankfully, this was obviously fixed, but it is funny to think that Bethesda didn't even consider us playing the game 2 months in for 2019 and beyond. Now, one huge bit of drama for Bethesda that just gave them an absolute headache was that shortly after the game's launch, people were able to discover the development room. Now, for those who have not played a Bethesda game before, or if they have and they might not know this, essentially this is just a secret room used for developers. I know, right? Shocking. And it has every item in the game. It was featured in both Skyrim and Fallout 4 respectively, but the fact that it was so easy to access and potentially ruin the whole game's economy before it even began, while it was in its infancy, is genuinely insane. I'm actually not sure if Bethesda has now found a way to make the room completely inaccessible, but they did patch it to the point where if any account was within the area of the development room, then their account would be pretty much flagged for getting banned permanently. Funnily enough, speaking of bans, there was a chance that you actually would have got an email from Bethesda support simply saying that if you want to appeal the account's closure, then all you had to do is simply write an essay on how you were able to access the room. They also did this for accounts detected using third-party cheat software, where you had to write an essay on why the use of third-party cheat software is detrimental to an online gaming community. Speaking of Bethesda support, there was another incident involving them where they would actually grant refunds to players. Now, normally this is normal and companies will only allow between 2 hours of gameplay, but in this case, players who had tens and tens of hours on the game were still able to get a refund. Now, unfortunately, this quickly backfired with the amount of refund requests that were being requested, and they obviously ended up changing their tone because they didn't want to lose all their money, and players were now no longer able to get refunds. But just wait, because that's not the only thing that Bethesda did either. Now, alongside the standard edition of Fallout 76, there was also a pretty sweet Power Armor edition that provided fans of the series with a lot of cool features. I personally wanted it myself, but I couldn't afford it at the time. Now, one of these features was a very nice canvas bag. However, Bethesda decided to do the, cheeky illegal, and instead of giving fans their promised canvas bag, they gave them a nylon bag instead of lower quality. Now, how do you think Bethesda responded to this? Did they straight up say, look, we're sorry for doing this, we'll send replacement canvas bags straight away? Absolutely not, because why make such a logical decision? They instead offered fans with 500 atoms. Now, for $200 for this edition, how much do you think 500 atoms is worth? Must be a pretty healthy amount for that amount of dollars, right? Oh yes, it was. About $4.99. The reason for switching the canvas bag to nylon was due to having an insufficient amount of materials. But they made a canvas bag for influencers. So it's like, what? Why did you make the actual bag for them, but then make more of a cheaper product for actual paying fans? Eventually, Bethesda decided to make the canvas bag as they sensed a potential lawsuit, so they just simply asked folks that if they did want one, just request one on the Bethesda support site. All you need to do is provide your personal information and what can go wrong. That is, again, exactly what happened. Because there's a catch. Bethesda accidentally left parts visible to the public, which is normally only meant to be seen by employees. So this means that me or you could see everyone's ticket submitted to get their precious canvas bag. But with that, they've pretty much been doxed. Their name, their address, their personal information, all of it was now exposed to everyone who was on the Bethesda support site. And what did they do? They just simply shut down the site. What actually happened to the game after this disastrous launch? As you can imagine, player numbers dramatically went down, and it could have been a case of Bethesda just saying, do you know what? Let's shut up the shop, we've realised our mistake. But they didn't actually do that. Instead, they actually began working on the game more properly through taking in everyone's feedback in an attempt to apologise to the fans. Each update began to improve the fundamentals of the game, aside from one that brought up old bugs, but aside from that, the game was being slowly improved and was being led towards a better state. Granted, just like previously mentioned, there was still some issues that Bethesda had and still have, like Fallout First. This subscription service paywalls really essential things like scrap boxes. Like, my god, the amount of scrap I have in my inventory that's taken up so much space. I would love to have a scrapbook, but I'm not paying that amount of money. And another thing was private worlds. So yes, if you wanted that single player experience, it's been slapped behind a paywall. Obviously, there's a lot of other things as well included in Fallout First, but these 2 points were generally the ones that got most vocalness out of the community. While annoying that it is, they have continuously provided free updates in the game, which, to be honest, fans have appreciated for Bethesda taking its approach in actually fixing the game like No Man's Sky, instead of just abandoning it or taking the money and running away. Since 2019, where we had the first major update, there has been 23 of them added to the game, and it's actually saw a boost in player count thanks to the success of the Amazon TV show. While the game definitely had a disastrous launch that, I still think might leave some people having a sour taste of Bethesda, I do think that overall in time, they've helped us re-establish that relationship between us, the players, and themselves. It does seem like they've somehow managed to survive their own nuclear fallout in style, and I am genuinely excited to see what the future of Fallout 76 has in store, alongside the Fallout TV show, and of course the inevitable release of Fallout 5 in the far future. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed this style of content, then please let me know in the comments, and if you want to support the channel, then please consider subscribing, liking, or even sending over a thanks if you are able to, and I will see you in the next video.